Peter, thank you so much. And again, good news there that the risk appetite is back, and there has to be investment in decarbonisation. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen for free. So again, there is investment that needs to be done, and this investment needs to be done from the private sector, but it also needs the support of the governments as well. So it is about making sure that everybody's on board, that the sovereign wealth funds are active, and that the governments are active, and again, that the support is there. This is absolutely crucial, and it is so important in terms of making sure that risk appetite. We're going to probably talk a little bit more about that in our panel here. So let me bring my dear colleagues up on stage. We're going to be looking at supply chain innovation when it comes to decarbonisation, the environment once again. So let me invite my dear panel here. We have Rawan Al-Sheri. Rawan is a master's student in chemistry at KAUST, the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. Rawan, please join me on stage here. It's great to have you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your voice in terms of what you are working on and, you know, the expertise that you have. Lovely to see you, my dear. Benjamin Geldenhuis, he is the co-founder and president of Tamarack Mining Services. Benjamin, lovely to see you. And Stefan Müller, he is the CEO and founder of DGWA. So let's see what my dear panel has to talk about. And stay with us, we have still lots more to come. So we have a big panel coming in just a few minutes, well, half an hour, but do stay with us. Rawan, let me just start with you. There's so much going on in the sector at the moment. And when we look at the emissions that are coming from the mining sector, predominantly because of energy consumption. But these, you know, the emissions are there, energy consumption's there, the demand is huge. So what are we going to do to actually resolve this?
Energies and how we can use that to, let's say, reach a decarbonizing environment and reduce our carbon footprint. So I look at the supply chain and the steps that we have in the supply chain and focus on how we can use renewable fuels, for example, in the different steps to reduce the carbon emissions.
We have a lot more to talk about on this. Benjamin, when we look about, I suppose, decarbonisation, you know, how does it happen in the mining sector, you know, and particularly in terms of the supply chain? A lot of things have to come together to make sure that we actually decarbonise quickly and sustainably and properly.
Yes, thanks. So we've always said that the mining decarbonization is comprehensive. It's a total ecosystem, and it also branches out into other areas of industry that actually feeds into the mining industry. So where we look at it from the picks and shovels business that goes into mining jurisdiction, we're increasingly seeing in our membership, which is the mining companies, that there's an awareness, an awakening awareness that part of the supply chain also presents opportunity for low-hanging fruit in starting to bring decarbonizations into the reality. There are certain issues that are complicated when we look at it. For instance, to the point of energy utilization on the mines. Not everywhere do you have the opportunity to suddenly switch to alternative forms of power. But when you look at how mines buy, what they buy, and when they buy, there are efficiencies that you can introduce from day one. You can do it tomorrow. And we're seeing that the mining areas, Northern Ontario, parts of Mexico, the US, are starting to embrace this. And when I look at the objectives of, for instance, the Kingdom and other jurisdictions like Greenland, where you have pristine opportunity to do things around the picks and shovel side of the supply chain correctly or more innovative from day one, then you can start saying, well, decarbonization actually becomes a reality as a component from the industry side.
And I love the way you frame it in terms of the picks and shovels. Earlier we were talking about high tech, but we still have to balance high tech with the picks and shovels. We desperately still need them. Stefan, we look at the importance of ESG standards. We look at many people and many panels talked about ESG. What are we doing? Are we doing it right? But talk to me about who sets the ESG standards, because you have, I suppose, a few issues around this. And indeed, when we look at, you know, the standards, they're not all created equal sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That this question alone could fill the whole conference, where I'm happy to be invited again this year. So it seems that the kingdom and the audience wants to hear what I have to say. It is very difficult to set up standards. I think I'm not the first guy on that conference who says that you cannot compare one mine with another mine on planet Earth, and that every mine has its challenges, other than an office building where you can say, okay, you have to put up solar power, you have to recycle your paper and stuff like that. So you cannot create standards for the mining business in general. That means that, for example, to make the picture even a bit bigger, I give you an example. I'm from Germany, and we want to reach very ambitious CO2 targets. For example, we don't sell EVs, traditional cars from 2020, 35 ongoing. We want to be 50% of our power out of wind power in 2030. That means we need a hell lot of minerals that are not existing to make Germany greener, to make Europe greener, which means we have to mine a lot all over planet Earth. And lots of these mining operations may not be dark green. You have these table in mind that you see on every product now. These mining operations may be only light green or even dark yellow, not red, but somewhere between, but not dark green. But a light green operation somewhere on planet Earth may have a little, the light green, only light green impact may be lower than the dark green result through the wind turbines, for example, that you feed with the rare earth you mine somewhere on planet Earth, which means you have to set the standards not for an exploration project, not for a pre-production project, not for a mine project. You have to set it for the whole value chain, which means if a very green end product is financing a light green mining operation and the complete result is almost dark green, then it's nice. But the investors, and now we come to the next point, the investors, and that is new in that whole ESG discussion, that the investors set the pace here, because they say we simply don't invest in dirty or in not dark green products any longer, projects any longer. If they don't invest in early stage mining projects, to come back to the mining topic, but that counts on every value chain of every product, if they don't invest in early stage mining projects that are not dark green, then we don't have the dark green end products, which means you have to link the end product with the beginning of the value chain.
And how difficult is that? And in terms of the obstacles to that happening at the moment?
I mean, in fact, what you see when it comes, for example, to the automotive industry, the OEMs start investing in exploration companies.
Yes.
So, and that is how it has to work in the future. If an OEM says, okay, we invest in that mine, it may be only light green, but the end product is dark green, and the overall value chain becomes almost dark green, then it's fine. But bringing the OEMs and other end producers of products that will be decarbonized and electrified to bring them over the line to invest in an early stage mining operation, for example, or even cotton or whatever, or meat, or it's in all kinds of products, it's the same thing. That is a very difficult step, and governments all over the world supporting that heavily, but on the other side, most of the industrial world is democracy, and corporates do not listen that much to governments. That's the next problem. So, to answer your question, who sets up these standards? I have no idea.
Yeah, and again, this is the industry likes a little bit of certainty and likes a little bit of reassurance in terms of what they need to do, and we've talked about that, today. But Ben, perhaps come back to, so how is the industry coping? I mean, as we say, not all created equal. I know you're encouraged with the adherence to ESG reporting, but it's not everybody that's reporting. And again, just as Stefan says there's a variety of standards, which one to pick. And I guess we're still in that learning phase, but we've got to get there soon and figure it out and make sure that everybody's reporting to something like the same standards.
So with emissions targets being set, it inevitably will become a practical exercise as to how listed companies in the capital markets have to report these ESG compliance. And we're already seeing a lot of focus on how companies report, and there's ample examples. We foresee that in the next period, 18 months, 24 months, there's going to be an increasing focus on, like I call it, the fix and shovel supply chain, and what is the compliance across across that. And these reporting targets then become a measure that is used by mining companies to distinguish themselves and make themselves attractive to mining. Where we get practical on this front is to say to mining companies that it is important to be able to measure this, and if you then break up the components of ESG, there's huge emphasis on the environment. That requires new technology to be capable of measuring this. You've got the society component that cannot be underestimated, and other panels have discussed on the importance of that contribution. Again, measurement becomes the key to demonstrating success and actually the contribution that the mine makes to the local community within which it operates. And then ultimately you get to the governance, and we see the governance as becoming self-fulfilling in the sense that if we look at the picks and shovel side of the supply chain and innovation around how that is becoming more efficient in how you're buying, then the whole bundle will contribute to the reporting that society requires from the mining industry.
Yeah. When we look, perhaps Rowan, you come in here, the energy demand, without a doubt, it's going to increase. You've been here listening to people for the last couple of days. What have you picked up in terms of people who are talking about what needs to be done, what can be done, and where within all of that information does it look like maybe the fastest route to action?
I think for now we need, based on everything I've heard for the last 2 days, we need to re-envision and reimagine the supply chain. We need to come up with new ideas and use technology that is developing and have still developed to make the processes more environmentally friendly. And one of the talks I heard was about making recycling a part of the supply chain, because right now we focus on mining and producing metals, but then the recycling part, we give it to somebody else. And one of the speakers who spoke yesterday talked about the idea of recycling as a part of the mining process, and that's one part of reimagining mining and just revolutionizing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people would like to see that, but coming back to, Ben, what you even talking about picks and shovels, revolutionizing an industry like this is, it's an aspiration, I think. I think when we have greenfield sites, we can do so much more, but it's probably a little bit of 5 steps forward, 3 back for a couple of years yet.
Well, I suppose there's an example from my previous life where it probably demonstrated just the complexity of this.
Yes.
So if you're in a pristine environment, you can really set the standard from day one, and it should happen. But we were involved in a project where electrification of haulage solutions was in discussion at the time. And it would then amount to more than just putting electrified autonomous vehicles into a mining pit for haulage solutions. This actually then culminated into a complete redesign of your entire pit layout that increases efficiencies, etc. So theoretically, this sounds like asteroid mining, wonderful idea. And then you start going into the practicalities. And the first question, the financiers would ask you, so just show us where this has been done before. And I think in that lies some of the challenges that our industry faces when it comes to innovation. It is a slower adoption than perhaps in certain other industries. But what I would say to you is, in a conversation recently, I said, there was a time that I can remember where we had conversations around who would use a cell phone or a tablet on a mine. And it took an inordinate amount of man hours to debate who gets what. I suppose today it's beyond comprehension that somebody wouldn't have a cell phone or a tablet. So that gives me encouragement for how this innovation will apply.
We don't have to have all the answers at the moment, but hopefully that will progress through them. Stefan, when you talked about the ESG standards and really not sure who's controlling them and all of that stuff, but at the same time, we want them to be fulfilled. What happens, I suppose, if they're not fulfilled? And is there a possibility, I think, in the longer term to maybe think that we will get more general standards that everybody can and perhaps, with policy has to adhere to?
Yes, but the question is how to do it. Global corporates, they follow, or they are under difficult countries all over the world, so they can move the critical operations in areas where the standards may be not that high. And I mean, where do we have global standards? Nowhere. In fact, nowhere, especially in a world that is now deglobalizing. It is very difficult to become all the people under one roof. We saw that just in Cairo at the climate meetings there. They hardly found a solution for similar problems. At the end of the day, it will be, as almost always, managed through money and the pricing, which means if there is a mining operation that is not, and you use the shovels, I use my dark green now all the time, so if there's a mining operation that is not dark green, then they may not be able to get the same price for their product than a dark green mining operation. However, there is huge countries on planet Earth who are not that much looking into ESG-conform operations, regardless if it's mining or not. So if China and other countries are not changing their mind, and profitability and market share is the only thing that they're looking for, and the profitability is something that may step down a little bit in the view of all that we discussed while these 2 days here, and I heard that a lot. It's something that happens in various sectors, but at the end of the day, it will be managed through the price of the product. So there may be green lithium and not green lithium at some point, and that may be for different products. And at the end of the day, it pays the end user. So if you buy a car with a clean battery, the car may be $300 more expensive than one car without a clean battery. But that also shows you that the impact of the end product is not that dramatic. And I can only talk for the change in mind in Germany, in Europe, but I see similar things in the industrial world everywhere. The people are willing to pay a higher price for a cleaner world, and that happens more and more. But we also have to understand, especially in mining, it is simply impossible to run a complete clean mining operation. And there is places on planet Earth where we continue to mine, for example, above the Arctic Circle. I mean, lots of us may follow these ice road truck drivers on Discovery Channel. This is something you will never, ever make climate neutral, but that's the only way to service these mining operations there. They have thousands of people working in areas where they have to eat and drink and sleep and work, and you need equipment and everything. You can't do solar power there, you can't do wind power there. It will be always gas and diesel. You cannot change that. So that is something we have to keep in mind, and when we understand that, and when we do the maths over the whole cycle of a product, from the mining operation to the production of the product, to the life cycle of the product, including the recycling, which is a very important case. One example, in Germany, we have 50% of our copper demand is coming out of recycling. And the recycling, the circular economy is something that can solve a lot of problems. There is companies, for example, who recycle EV batteries with an efficiency of 80%. There is not enough feed now, because we need more batteries to feed the recycling, and then we get the product back. That may keep the prices down a little bit. So it's in the nature of human being. There is an issue, and we try to solve it. In a lot of cases, we can solve it.
Yes.
And the mining industry is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the industry with the highest R&D expenses on planet Earth and on the asteroids. But they will find solutions for a lot of things. And when we come back next year, I think we are even a step further.
Rawan, when we look at the demand for minerals increasing, especially with renewable, energy technologies, electric cars and all of that, there's been some question in the last 2 days, really, are we going to be able to meet that demand? Because people have to double production, and there's some production out there, and perhaps maybe you can both come in on this as well in terms of the sort of, ferocity of that demand and how quick it will grow. So how do we meet it?
Yes, so based on my experience, so my research background is basically in renewable energy, and there's a lot of research going on in, for example, using electric vehicles, as you said, and using other types of fuels that are called renewable fuels that we can also use to facilitate a sustainable environment. And I think that we cannot meet the demand based on how everything looks right now, and we need to think about diversifying the energy resources. So I think we think about solar, we think about wind, but we don't think about the end product. We think about batteries. But what kind of batteries? We need to consider using things other than metals. So for example, there's a lot of research related to my own research focuses on, for example, formic acid. We think of using it to reach to use it as a circular, going from carbon dioxide to formic acid and so on. And we can use it in cars, and we've demonstrated that. So I think diversifying the energy resources would be the best way to go, instead of putting demand on an industry that cannot keep up.
And indeed, I mean, that diversification, I think, yes, has to happen, and it's beginning to happen. But I mean, I think at the moment, given some geopolitical issues, given a lot of other issues in the world, it might have been sort of the brakes have been put on for just maybe a little bit. Ben, when we look at that supply, I think stay with this for a minute, because if we can't meet that supply, and there's a lot of it that is needed, it's going to have a knock-on effect on the great hopes and aspirations for a renewable, greener future. What happens then?
One of the earlier panels spoke about the integrated value chains being put together for the manufacturing of batteries, which is important, and then into the wind turbine industry. So when I look at it from our perspective, when we look at the inquiries we're getting, the mines that we're working with currently, it is the gold mines, silver mines, base metal mines that are well established in jurisdictions. We're increasingly seeing requests by the emerging battery minerals sector. And when we step away from that, if you look at some of the inquiries that we see at the moment, a lot of it has got to do with feasibility studies, which shows there's a huge bubble of activity happening to a lesser or greater degree, depending on where the jurisdictions are located. One of the questions that then inevitably come up is, at what point does this become scalable to the requirements of the world, if you listen to the conversations that's happening everywhere? And that begs the question as to what type of consolidation will we see in that industry. So if I look at it from a supply chain into the industry, literally the picks and shovels that's needed to get these minerals out, you start thinking, some of these assets seem to be very spotty and sparsely, and will they have the scalability? And I think there's a discussion probably emerging around how will this industry respond to that, and it gets it's probably necessary sooner rather than later.
Stefan, how do you think we're going to actually deliver that supply that's needed?
Well, I don't want to go too much into the numbers, but there is serious analysis, for example, about the battery minerals that they say that we can't deliver that. If we cannot deliver the amount we need to reach all the goals that the industrial world has set to, for example, enter into the complete electrified automotive industry. We have to set up much more mine sites that are in production or in project, and lots of them will not be able to fulfill the extremely high standards. But I think we are currently in a situation, it's like a bull market in the equity market.
Yes.
At some point, when the taxi driver asks you what stocks you should buy, then you know, okay, it's time to sell. And the ESG discussion is absolutely fine and correct, but we should always put it in consideration with the real world. And when on one hand, we want to have a green world with no diesel cars any longer, with no gas heating any longer, all that, with less airplanes and all that, then we need to produce much more minerals all over the world. And it is already an issue to do that ESG conform, while we have no standard set up yet. We cannot fulfill that in the future, which means, in fact, the producer of the product and the producers of the semi-parts and the producer of the raw products and the explorers, they have to work closer together. And maybe for each and every product, you need a complete controlled value chain. Blockchain, for example, is something where you can do that with, that you can control the whole move of every single gram of mineral into the end product and all that. But I mean, the world is still very, very linked to each other. I mean, the war has changed a lot, but look at each and every product, more complex product. There's parts all over the world, and how difficult it will be to put the countries together and the corporates together who are involved in a car, an airplane, in a building, in an iPhone, in a watch, whatever it is, in food. That is something that is not this topic here, but the same conference you could held about food, it's the exact same thing. That is very difficult, and I guess we have to step back a few steps from the very high targets we want to achieve. We will achieve them at some point, but it's a development, and some people think we can do things overnight, and they forget that we have to eat, to breathe, to drive, to fly, to eat, to read, to educate. I mean, if they want to lose all that, no problem. We can switch down all computers overnight. We can switch down the lights overnight. We can stop driving and flying, no problem. But who wants that?
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, people still want their comforts in that sense, you know, so they'll give up so much, but they're not going to give up on everything. And Ben, innovation is absolutely essential right across the board, particularly when it comes to securing or sourcing and procurement supply chains. But that's journey, I suppose, from supplier to the pit or the rock face, so to speak. How dangerous is that journey right now? How lumpy is it? How cautious is it? A rocky road?
Well, we're certainly seeing the innovation from what we're bringing into the industry is definitely going to make a difference in the long term. And we see that rolling out because it's going to introduce efficiencies. It will enable the short term or the near term wins in decarbonization. I think that plays into, you've got to approach this in a balanced manner for the industry and because the interrelationship cannot be underestimated. We saw during COVID how the sort of impact in a jurisdictional isolation, or the fact that you know, the weirdest things that the industry should never have been in need of suddenly became as scarce as chicken teeth, like they say. So we're continuously seeing an approach to a balance when it comes to how do you bring this decarbonization into fruition in a comprehensive manner. You can't just do on one side without regard to the other side of the value chain. So stop all fossil fuels. That's never going to make sense.
Yeah. No, it's not, and it is about the concept of a transition. It's going to take a while, and everybody has to come on board and make sure. And I think that message is there. That's not the argument anymore. But Rowan, talk to me about perhaps the lack of transparency in some of the data, because that's what's making it difficult for people as well, I think.
Right. I think right now we don't have enough data to understand where we want to reduce emissions. For example, I think as Ben and Stefan has said, each mine and each process is different, and we need to collect enough data in order to understand each mine's needs and reduce emissions based on that. And I think that's the main issue, is that we need companies to be transparent about emissions and to actually analyze where the emissions are coming from. And then, based on the region and based on the data we collect, we can customize solutions to fit that region and also that mine. But for now, I think one of the main issues is that we don't have enough data for us to give viable solutions.
Yeah, please come in on this.
Yes, I think, and to the point of the data, I think it goes to the core of an example that we saw, where you suddenly have chemicals that come out of the fossil fuel industry, oil and gas industry, that is critical for the mining and processing of battery minerals. And if you just take it in isolation, like let's stop doing this, well, how are we going to mine and process these? And that goes to the data equation, which I think is very important.
Please, come ahead.
And lots of the current mining operations, they simply work and they're profitable, but receiving data out of that, number one, it would end in a disaster. And number two, technically, it's not that possible when you do not have a digitalized operation, for example. There is, of course, progress, and lots of operations will be modernized, electrified,
Yeah.
but the amount of operating mines to upgrade them on our standards, that's another challenge.
So, I mean, clearly on that, without a doubt, data, more data, better data is one of the calls to action. But a quick sort of 20-second call to action from, from you, Stefan.
So number one, the world has tried to come back closer together to set up somehow standards. And number two, the big corporates who are at the end of the value chain, they have to work together with everybody in front of them and have to stop being arrogant and squeezing every cent out because of profitability only. That's over. If we want to make that world greener, it costs money.
Ben, please.
We see that the embracing by the mining industry of what they buy, when they buy, why they buy,
Yes.
and is going to make some real inroads into the decarbonization debate, because that's going to enable data to make informed decisions.
And it has to happen. And Ron, I'm going to leave the closing word to you, and we're all very interested in the great work you're doing at KAUST and what they're doing as well.
Thank you. I think it's very important to incentivize the industry to change their approaches. And it's very important to give them something valuable to get them to make the change.
And again, that change, it's coming, I think. The commitment is here. We've heard it from every ministry. I think the ministries here very much aligned, making sure that industry is talking to finance, is talking to mining, is and talking to energy. Everybody is on board. So hopefully, with a lot of the information that has been brought here, and everybody's been talking, that it will all come together, and we'll have movement in the right direction, because ultimately that's where we have to go to make sure that that supply chain is decarbonized. Once again, thank you so much. Rawan, thank you, my dear Ben and Stefan. Again, thank you to our dear panel. We're very, very grateful to have them here.